Now we move on to our next news. We move on to U.S. The U.S. Department of War officials have confirmed a recent military strike on a suspected drug smuggling vessel in the Pacific Ocean. According to Pentagon officials, the strike was carried out as part of a broader counter-narcotics campaign targeting illicit trafficking routes near South America. The attack marks the latest in a series of operations aimed at disrupting drug trade activities, which have largely focused on the Caribbean in recent weeks. This strike is now the 8th known operation in the region. U.S. officials have confirmed that the vessel was involved in smuggling narcotics. The attack resulted in the deaths of 5 alleged smugglers. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to defend its strategy despite growing concerns from international leaders regarding the legality and potential risks of such actions. Now for this discussion, we welcome our guest Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Shruti, and now looking at these 8 attacks or counter actions by U.S. on Caribbean, how far can this keep going, and when U.S. says that this is legitimate, or they have the proofs, but do we know of any proofs that U.S. has publicized?
Greetings, Asuma. Thank you so much for inviting me. From what I understand, the UN report does not designate Venezuela as the primary source or even a large transit corridor for drugs for USA. So any proof the Donald Trump regime has of being a narco-terror hub under the aegis of Maduro in Venezuela seems kind of politically motivated, because there is no proof from a neutral agency that backs up their statements. They are sinking vessels, killing sailors, without actually trying to show the world why. If they have the ability to sink a vessel, I'm sure they also have the ability to capture it with all its good, or at least some semblance of evidence that can prove to the world that this is not just USA trying to flex its muscles in the Caribbean Sea. The major part of drug problem that the USA unfortunately faces comes from Mexico and Colombia, and that goes through the land route. Some of it comes through the Pacific route also, but almost none of it, none would be a very strong word, but a very small margin of it probably comes through the Caribbean. If Venezuela is a transit corridor, then those drugs are never aimed at USA. Those drugs are aimed towards the European continent and UK. So from what we understand as the World Geopolitical Analysts Group, the UN reports are very, very clear about how this is. Maduro, on the other hand, in 2025, according to a UN report, has seized the anti-narcotics agents there have seized about 52 tons, grounded 400 narco transit-linked aircrafts in Venezuela. So he's trying to control whatever nexus that is there, that is using Venezuela as a zone of transiting drugs. But instead of appreciating any of these efforts, US is sinking ships without public proof. Just take my word for it is no longer applicable in the new world of multipolar geopolitics. We cannot just say, just because I'm USA, you need to listen to me. Provide the proof for your actions, or you are just as bad as the people who bomb nations just because they want access to the resources. And this is exactly what the world is witnessing in the case of USA versus Venezuela.
And Shruti, like building on that, Maduro is trying, and you've mentioned all the facts over here, and US instead of appreciating is sinking ships. So what's US's agenda here? So what's their final goal over here? Why are they continuing to do this towards Venezuela, even Colombia?
I completely understand where this question is coming from. So let's take a few sections of events that are happening across the world. One, the Nobel Peace Prize is given to a lady from Venezuela who is openly against Maduro. She gave public interviews after her a victory as a Nobel Peace Prize winner was declared. She gave public interviews where she said she will provide privatization of the oil reserves that are in the hands of Venezuela, which is, I believe, the largest oil reserves in the world, more than 300 billion barrels of it. Even more than Saudi Arabia. So this is one of the things that should trigger a question in somebody's mind. The second part is that, of course, the Maduro regime is accused of being very non-transparent of their elections. In the 2024 elections, the UN themselves had said, please do not destroy the voting records, but they have not had, but Maduro regime did not provide proof of his victory. So there is a question on whether Maduro is actually a democratically represented leader of the nation. So that particular segment is also there. Then we look at what Donald Trump and his regime is saying. They've labeled Maduro a narco-terrorist. They have openly supported, J.D. Vance included, the lady who wants to be the new face. I believe her name is Maria, who's the Nobel Peace Prize winner for 2025. So they are openly supporting that lady as a political figurehead of and they have openly said that there will be CIA operations in Venezuela. Now they've left that question open, whether it's the CIA operations are for regime change or drug control, nobody knows. But CIA is notorious for having a rule book on how to change regimes so that USA can get access to resources of a particular nation. If we stitch all of this up, we see that the nationalization projects under Maduro is not something that USA is very happy with. Then we see that a large amount of oil reserves rests under a nation which is not completely submissive to USA. Then we see a person who is anti-Maduro being celebrated in the Western world. So all of this stitched together a narrative for anybody to understand that USA is trying to dominate a large amount of resources of Venezuela, and they find Maduro as a stumbling block, and they will try everything to brand him a criminal, to ensure that the regime change happens, and the USA benefits from all the resources that the nation has to offer. On the other side of the coin, US does have a large amount of drug problem. The drugs come from across the borders from Mexico and Colombia. They are trying to fight that, but not as aggressively as I see them fighting in the Caribbean Sea with Venezuela. Why Venezuela is a question which comes from, the answer for which comes through stitching up all the different parts of the conversation that we see happening around on Venezuela. So this is something that should be projected, that although Venezuela might have its problems, sinking ships is not the answer. Provide proof and then have a neutral party take action rather than becoming the king of the world and deciding who gets to live and who gets to die.
Yes, Shruti, thank you always for joining us, and you amaze me with your answer, with connecting all the dots over here. That was Shruti Das Gupta, International Affairs expert, joined us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Britain has sanctions Balkan-based criminal gangs involved in forged documents and human trafficking, as well as those financing illegal migration. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called it a vile trade and said the gangs must be taken down through strong international cooperation. The summit in London with Western Balkan leaders will also focus on reducing illegal migration, countering Russian influence, and other shared threats. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has urged progress in Serbia-Kosovo relations, which remain a sensitive issue for the region. This is what Keir Starmer has said.
The Western Balkans has long been a vital transit route for the criminal smuggling gangs. You don't want to see those gangs operating in your territory, and we all suffer the consequences of their action. We're talking of a criminal enterprise here, a vile trade with people making huge amounts of money that directly impacts on all of us. So we have to take these gangs down, smash them, through proper, purposeful cooperation.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching.